Hey everyone, Rarity Dash here. Time for another Patreon-sponsored blind reaction. And this one comes to you courtesy of Will, who has requested that I react to the Castlevania Timeline Part 2, Destiny of the Belmont Clan Button Smash by GamerthumbTV. So, yeah, we're continuing this. We did Part 1 last month, and it was pretty cool. And now we're doing Part 2, and it should be cool as well. Part 1 covered the first part of the timeline, which was Lament of Innocence, Castlevania 3, I believe, the one that the Netflix series covers, and then Curse of Darkness. And, yeah, pretty interesting. Nice to kind of go through the games again and just have the timeline fully laid out. And next, I think, is it Simon? I forget. I mean, I've played a lot of the games. I know a lot about Castlevania lore, but I don't know if I have the timeline fully worked out in my head exactly. So I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's Simon. I think we're going to Castlevania 1. Though, I guess we'll find out. Let's go ahead and get this started. Here we go. GamerthumbTV. Button Smash.
Welcome to the Castlevania Timeline, Part 2, Destiny of the Belmont Clan. In Part 1, we explored the events that would turn the man known as Matthias into the powerful vampire Dracula, ending with his demise at the hands of one of his own generals. After Dracula's death and the end of his dark curse, humanity rebuilt.
Dark curse?
And the
Curse of
heroics
Darkness?
of the Belmont Clan and Dracula's
see what you did there.
humanity were passed down in stories. The world enjoyed almost a century of peace, and Trevor Belmont's descendant and keeper of the vampire killer was a young vampire hunter named Christopher Belmont.
Hi, Christopher
lived in the shadow of his
I don't remember Christopher.
And was a man plagued by recent
it's like a
nightmares
comic?
involving Dracula's return. He feared that these dreams were warnings from beyond, and prayed that the stories
it looks
of
like a Western
Dracula
comic,
were
not manga or
legends
anything.
told to scare children. Christopher
So that's
thought
kinda
he may just
different.
have been nervous because of his upcoming wedding to his fiancée Ileana. Christopher and Ileana married happily, but Christopher's dreams would soon prove to be right. Unknown to Christopher, since the time of Dracula, a number of cults had formed that worshipped him and wished for his return. One such cult, known as the Bartley clan, made their way into the forbidden ruins of Dracula's castle and performed several sacrifices, engaging in a dark ritual in the hopes of resurrecting Dracula. Dracula returned from the dead with revenge on his mind and made it his mission to draw out the descendant of Trevor Belmont in an effort to wipe out the bloodline. Soon after, Christopher received news that his family crypt was vandalized. After investigating, he discovered the tomb of his parents was desecrated and their bodies mutilated.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up.
At this point, Christopher knew his destiny was calling him, and Dracula had returned to take revenge on his family. Grabbing the vampire killer bestowed upon him, he set off for Dracula's newly risen castle. This takes us to the year 1576 and the events of the Castlevania adventure. Inspired by the heroics of his ancestor Trevor, Christopher was determined to keep the dark times of the past from happening.
I don't think I've even heard of that one.
And made his way to Dracula's castle. Dracula's forces stood no chance against the might of the vampire killer.
It looks pretty, very Game Boy. Kinda limited. I mean, it still looks like Castlevania, though. It's got all the familiar elements.
Eventually, meeting the Dark Lord face to face, Christopher attacked him relentlessly. Realizing he was still too weak from his recent resurrection, Dracula turned into a new form and attempted to escape before he could be sent away from the physical world once again. With the final
doesn't look like that difficult Dracula fight.
Christopher escaped, watching as Castlevania crumbled.
The controls probably are bad.
So many years ago, but Christopher's story was far from over. Unknown to him, Dracula had used the last of his power to escape, closing off the events of the Castlevania adventure. Christopher returned home to his wife Ileana, and she became pregnant with a child. Watching from afar while recovering his power, Dracula devised a plot that would later haunt Christopher and his family.
Oh.
As the years passed, Christopher's son Soleil Belmont was born, and he was trained as a vampire hunter, like all Belmont children before him. Christopher knew the possibility of Dracula's return was now a reality, and wanted Soleil to be ready to wield the vampire killer should the need arise. At the age of 15, Soleil had completed his training as a vampire hunter, and a ceremony was held in town to celebrate the occasion. But on the morning after the ceremony, it was discovered that he had vanished into thin air. Enough time had passed for Dracula to regain much of his power, and he had taken Soleil in an effort to draw Christopher out and destroy his family in front of him. But the young boy showed no fear against Dracula, and knew his father would come to rescue him. During the evening of his kidnapping, the earth shook with a thunderous roar, and 4 castles appeared. Christopher answered Dracula's challenge by picking up the vampire killer whip one last time. Dracula had crossed the line and directly attacked his family, and Christopher swore that the Dark Lord wouldn't escape his wrath this time. This leads us to the year 1591.
Okay, yeah, I never played any of the Game Boy ones.
Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge.
Didn't really know much about them.
Christopher searched for Dracula through all 4 castles, defeating the guardians placed in each one.
Does look like an improvement in terms of visuals. Cool. It's actually pretty cool for Game Boy.
Dracula had razed those castles, hoping that they would slow down Christopher, while he finalized his revenge against him. Christopher stormed Dracula's castle and found his son within its walls, but he made a terrible discovery. While Christopher was distracted searching for Dracula, the evil vampire had used his dark magic to possess Soleil, putting him completely under his control. Dracula ordered him to attack his father, with the goal of forcing Christopher to kill his son. Belmont blood in his veins and the sight of his father in front of him, Soleil was able to fight off the possession and regain his humanity. Dracula's plan had failed, and he waited for the inevitable confrontation with Christopher. This time, Christopher made sure that Dracula didn't have a chance to escape.
There we go. Well, this already looks like a more epic Dracula fight.
Father and son stood together watching Castlevania fall, completely confident that Dracula had been destroyed. But they both knew that Dracula's followers were still out there, and his resurrection would occur again. 100 years later, Soleil's descendant Simon Belmont was the current master of the vampire killer.
Now it's Simon.
He was quite different from his ancestors before him. Leon Belmont was a man with an unshakable sense of responsibility. Trevor saw the world destroyed before him, and his fierce determination to set things right saved it. And Christopher and Soleil were a father and son team who reluctantly accepted the fate that they were born into. Simon, on the other hand, was impulsive and headstrong. During his time, his ancestors were celebrated heroes, and Simon wished nothing more than for Dracula to return, so he can test his own strength against him, and take his place among
That's definitely different.
On Easter Sunday, one of Dracula's cults gathered at an abandoned monastery.
Gotta be careful what you wish for.
Performed a ritual to resurrect their master, and Castlevania rose once again. The people of Europe knew the Belmonts were the only ones powerful enough to put Dracula down and prevent his rise to power. They turned to Simon for help, and eager to face his destined foe, Simon rushed to Castlevania.
There we go. The moon!
Through the years, Dracula had become all too familiar with his old friend Leon's bloodline.
Game that started it all.
As long as a member of the Belmont clan was alive, with the vampire killer in hand, his rule would be threatened. He needed to destroy Simon before beginning his extermination of humanity. Seething with rage, Dracula waited patiently for the arrogant warrior at the top of his castle. This brings us to the year 1691 and the events of the original Castlevania. Simon easily fought his way through Dracula's castle, destroying any monsters in his way.
I thought the game was pretty hard, honestly. I don't know how easy Simon's time was.
Eventually making it to the resurrected Death, protecting his master. After defeating Death, Simon stood before Dracula and rushed into battle.
And this just looks like the classic Dracula.
Simon left an opportunity open for him to transform into a demonic form, which would later have consequences for the young man.
I see
Simon had killed Dracula and taken his place among his ancestors and closing
had to have
off
a
the
few
events
attempts
of the
there.
original Castlevania. Word spread of Simon's victory throughout all of Europe, making him one of the most famous and respected members of the Belmont clan.
Okay, well he got what he wanted.
Carelessness during the battle with Dracula cost him dearly. In his demonic form, Dracula had inflicted a wound on Simon's back, which he had cursed before his death. If another Belmont was going to send him back to the dead, he would make sure the Belmont would pay with his life as well. Over the next 7 years, Simon found himself suffering from a mysterious illness that was slowly crippling his body. He knew the end of his life was nearing, and while praying at his family cemetery, he encountered a gypsy that was searching for him. She told him that monsters were appearing in nearby towns, and Dracula was responsible for Simon's sickness. To lift the curse, Simon would need to kill Dracula again, but all that remained of the Vampire King were his remains. Dracula's followers were planning on using his remains to resurrect him, but they chose to hide the remains instead before resurrecting him, in an effort to wait for the curse to end Simon's life. Simon thanked the gypsy for her information and set out to find Dracula's remains.
So this one you're actually trying to resurrect Dracula.
The year 1698 and the events
that's kind of cool.
Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. Simon traveled through different
deliberately
towns
trying to
across
bring him
Europe,
back
asking the
so you can fight him
townspeople for information to locate where Dracula's forces had hidden his remains. He planned to use the remains to perform the resurrection himself before Dracula's followers had the chance. Most of the townspeople recognized the famed vampire hunter and his whip, and with
this is the game with the
received
kind
from
of
them,
questionable
Simon was able to
reputation.
track down Dracula's remains one after another. One of his nails, his rib, his eyeball, his ring, and his heart. During his travels, Simon also faced off against two creatures leading Dracula's forces. The vampire Countess Carmilla, who would play a major role in one of Dracula's later resurrections, and Death, who Simon had already defeated once before. With Dracula's remains in hand and his army of monsters obliterated, Simon returned to the abandoned ruins of Castlevania and performed the ritual to resurrect his old foe. To Dracula's surprise, when he awakened, instead of finding his followers there waiting for him, he saw Simon standing before him with the vampire killer in hand. Simon had learned from the arrogance of his youth and attacked Dracula before he even had a chance to strike.
Okay, well that's interesting.
The sickness Simon was suffering from lifted, and out of respect for the enemy that had challenged
Is that really all there
him
is to the Dracula
fiercely,
fight?
he buried what was left of Dracula, and lived to pass down his wisdom, closing off the events of Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. 48 years later, the grandson of Simon Belmont, Juste
Harmony of
Belmont, received the title
Dissonance?
of Vampire Hunter, and was handed the legendary Vampire Killer. Juste's
Fun game.
best friend Maxim became jealous that he was given the title of Vampire Hunter instead of him, and went on a journey to train himself and prove he was worthy of the Vampire Hunter title. 2 years later, Maxim returned to the village badly wounded and suffering from memory loss, telling Juste that their childhood friend Liddy was kidnapped. Juste grabbed the vampire killer, and Maxim led him to the only place he could remember that he had been, a castle that had appeared mysteriously. And Juste remembered the stories his grandfather Simon had told him during his childhood, and deep inside he knew this was Castlevania, meaning that Dracula's return was imminent. Knowing that Simon had buried what was left of Dracula when he defeated him before, Juste Juste and Maxim entered the castle to find out why it had returned, and why Liddy was taken there. This leads us to the year 1748 and the events of Castlevania, Harmony of Dissonance. Maxim and Juste split up and went their separate ways in order to locate Liddy faster. While exploring the castle, Juste encountered Dracula's right-hand man, Death. Death revealed that the power that resurrected the castle wasn't his master's, taunting Juste and escaping. The two friends searching for Liddy ran into each other, and Maxim said he was slowly regaining his memory, remembering being inside the castle before, and they separated once again. Juste fought his way through the horrors of the castle, and a second hellish version of the castle stuck between dimensions.
Cool boss fights. Gotta have a Minotaur. Or Legion.
Eventually, he ran into Maxim
serious
again.
nostalgia here.
Maxim had regained much of his memory. He remembered that in his jealousy of Juste's success as a vampire hunter, he had secretly tracked down and collected Dracula's remains that Simon had previously used. Not being of Belmont blood, Maxim was easily influenced by Dracula from the other side, and he unknowingly brought Liddy to the risen castle. Maxim knew he was still open to Dracula's influence and decided it would be safer if he stayed behind, while apologizing to Juste and putting all of his confidence in his friend. Juste left to save Liddy and stop Dracula from rising again. Finding Death once again, he demanded to know where Liddy was taken, and Death told him that Maxim had already succumbed to Dracula's influence and had been preparing Liddy to sacrifice her life energy to Dracula.
And then you fight him. Oh yeah. I remember this.
Juste found him performing the ritual to resurrect Dracula, but interrupted it before it could complete. Fully possessed by Dracula, Maxim attacked his friend. The real Maxim struggled to resist Dracula's control and eventually forced him out of his body, along with his remains, which partially let Dracula come back into the physical world. With nowhere near his complete power intact, Dracula's spirit challenged Juste.
Kind of a shame when you don't even get to fight the real Dracula. Just, well, I mean, that's still pretty awesome. It's just amalgamation of all the body parts.
Juste was successful in stopping Dracula from returning. Maxim lived with the guilt of what he tried to do, but Liddy was safe, and the three friends returned home to their village, closing off the events of Castlevania, Harmony of Dissonance. And over the years, Juste and Liddy became closer and eventually married. Having a child, they named Richter. Richter Belmont, who would become the most powerful Belmont that had ever lived, and one that would unintentionally be responsible for cursing the entire Belmont bloodline. Years passed as Richter grew into a strong young man, and at age 19, he received the Vampire Killer, while Dracula's cult, led by Dracula's dark priest, Shaft, started the ritual to bring back their master, kidnapping a young virgin girl and sacrificing her.
Yeah. Bringing him back.
Dracula had risen again, and instead of openly inviting a Belmont to come challenge him, he commanded his army of monsters to immediately attack humanity and burn down any village they could find. This leads us to the year 1792 and the events of Castlevania,
Rondo of Blood.
Dracula was back in the physical world, and with the resurrection completed, he had regained his full strength. While out training, Richter realized that Castlevania had risen and could see smoke rising from his village. He sped home, but was interrupted by Death.
That's a cool sequence.
Testing the young vampire hunter's power, Death attacked him. Impressed with his power, Death returned to Dracula to let him know that Richter may pose a problem. Richter arrived home and to his horror, discovered that most of the village was burned to the ground. Dracula's monsters were everywhere, and destruction of this magnitude hadn't been seen since the time of Trevor Belmont. Richter searched through the village for his girlfriend Annette and discovered that she was taken, as well as Tara, a nun from the local church.
I think I've
Iris,
played this one.
daughter of the town doctor, and Maria, a young girl that would eventually become a partner to Richter and a good
I remember
friend.
Maria. Well, that's a thing. That seemed pretty easy.
Richter began his
Oh.
search for the kidnapped girl and
That's
ran
cool.
into Shaft, holding Maria captive.
I remember Shaft.
escaped before the vampire hunter
I think
could
I have
track him
played this.
down.
With some
Richter
version of
rescued
it.
Maria, and she begged him to let her help.
My name's Maria. Maria Renard.
Mm-hmm.
I'll help you.
No.
I don't remember these
Be
graphics though,
good.
so
Go home back to your mom and dad.
I think I played
They're
like some
worried
kind
about
of
They were killed.
remake or something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'm definitely coming with you.
You just won't take no for an answer, will you? All right, fine.
Yeah, let's bring the child along.
But promise me you'll run if things get too dangerous.
At first, Richter laughed off the idea of a 12-year-old
Gotta love
girl
Maria.
helping him, but then realized that she had a unique power. Maria was
Birds.
a distant relative of the Belmont clan and had a connection to animals, which allowed her to use their abilities. So Maria joined Richter on his mission, and she ended up being an extremely valuable ally. Powerful enough to destroy Dracula's servant Carmilla, who Simon previously fought during the events of Simon's quest.
Oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Don't do that to the child. Oh, that's cool.
And Maria helped Richter track down the other missing girls. All he had
Yes.
left to do was to find his girlfriend Annette and make Dracula pay for all the lost lives he was responsible
Was there like a remake of this game?
Dracula,
I think I...
realizing he may have underestimated Richter's power, sent Death away from the castle to directly attack the young vampire hunter before he could reach him. But Death was no match for the Belmont.
Yeah, this definitely seems familiar. This death fight. Wow. It's pretty badass.
Dracula's
Just one
last
form
line
this
of
time, though.
defense was the Dark Priest Shaft, who confronted Richter and summoned multiple monsters to wear him down.
Got a Gorgon. Mummy. Just bringing out everything. Frankenstein. Just all the classics.
But Richter prevailed and attacked Shaft directly, destroying him. He made his way up to Dracula's clock tower and found the hidden chamber.
Gotta have the
that
clock
was being
tower.
held.
Annette!
Richter!
Aww.
It's you!
You're alright.
I knew you'd come.
Gotta love the
Get
voice
as far
acting.
away as you can.
Richter, please, don't die. Come back in one piece.
Sure. Leave this to me.
All Richter had left to do was to confront the Dark Lord of the castle, but Shaft was in his way once again, desperately trying to protect Dracula. The evil priest spirit attacked Richter with the remains of the creatures he had already defeated, but it still was not enough.
That's cool though. Oh.
nothing left standing in his way,
There we go.
Richter rushed towards Dracula's chambers and found the vampire waiting for him, and more powerful than he had ever been.
Die, monster! You don't belong.
Here we
in
go.
this world. It was not by my hand.
Now this is
It
just
was
classic.
Given flesh.
Definitely know
Your
this.
words are as empty as your soul. Mankind ill needs a savior such as you.
What is a man? A miserable little pile?
The meme.
But enough talk.
The meme is
How
real.
about you?
There we go. Oh. Oh.
Grant him your strength!
Cool.
No, it cannot be.
Maria with the save there.
With Maria's help, Richter slayed Dracula at the height of his power, firmly letting him know that he could never stand a chance against the Belmont clan. Dracula was destroyed and his castle vanished. Richter made his way home not knowing that the darkest times for the Belmont clan were soon coming.
Symphony of the
This
Night.
closes off the events of Castlevania, Rondo of Blood. Richter married Annette, and Maria became his vampire hunting partner. Richter had heard rumors that Shaft had somehow survived their encounters, and together with Maria, he traveled the land searching for the Dark Priest and wiping out the remainder of Dracula's
Shaft
forces.
just does want to
Years
die.
later, Castlevania appeared from the rubble, and Richter Belmont went missing. Nobody knew where he was, and a now 17-year-old Maria began searching for him, following the trail directly
Still 17
to
though.
Dracula's castle.
So I shouldn't say
At the
anything.
same time, Dracula's son Alucard woke up from his slumber. Although he had intended to be sealed away forever, Andy saw his father's castle standing before him. His last memories were of him fighting alongside Trevor, Grant, and Sypha against Dracula, and watching the castle crumble to the ground. Not realizing that Dracula had been attempting to return for centuries, and the Belmont clan had stopped him every time. Alucard thought it was unusual that Castlevania was present, yet he couldn't feel his father's presence, and he entered the castle to investigate. This leads us to the year 1797. and
There
the
we
events
go.
of Castlevania, Symphony of the Night. Alucard
Possibly the
found
best
the
one.
castle swarming with monsters. Someone had caused them all to appear, and it wasn't his father. Alucard was confronted by death, a familiar sight in the castle, and he was stripped of his
Yes.
weapons and abilities.
Very familiar.
Alucard, what is your business here?
I've come to put an end to this.
Still befriending mortals. I'll not ask you to return to our side, but I demand you cease your attack.
I will not.
You shall regret those words. We will meet again. What?
Alucard explored the castle, slowly regaining his powers and equipment, facing horrific
It's a cool
monsters,
enemy.
including a succubus posing as his mother.
Must despise humans. They are to be your prey.
My mother never said such a thing. No, you're not my mother. What kind of demon are you?
You broke free of my spell. I like that.
The good kind of demon.
Death in the dream world will set your soul wandering for eternity, demon.
Wait, I beg of you.
That death
He
cry.
also met Maria, who told him about Richter, and they worked together to find him.
He disappeared about a year ago, and I'm sure he's here. If you see him, please let me know.
As you wish, my lady.
Making his way through the massive castle, Alucard found Richter and could sense that he was Belmont, descended from Trevor. Richter revealed that he was the lord of the castle. Richter, the last man to have slayed Dracula, was responsible for summoning the castle and all of its monsters. But Alucard knew that something was wrong with Richter, and he could see through the illusion. A Belmont would never want to resurrect Dracula willingly.
Well, I mean, I guess willingly. What sets it apart from the Simon situation?
You've defeated me, but all is not yet lost. The resurrection of Count Dracula is at hand.
It was Shaft, still alive. He had cast a spell on Richter, taking over his mind.
No. What have I done?
Thank you, Alucard, for saving Richter.
Alucard? The same Alucard who fought alongside my ancestor, Trevor Belmont? That was over 300 years ago.
Maria, take Richter and leave here. I'll finish this.
After freeing Richter from Shaft's control and leaving him in Maria's care, Alucard entered an inverted version of Dracula's castle where Dracula's soul resided, and fought some of his father's most powerful monsters, including 3 demons posing as the 3 legendary heroes that Alucard had fought beside hundreds of years before.
Yeah, that's kind of messed up. Cypher.
And he also encountered death.
Of course.
Paid him back for stripping him of his equipment.
Wow. I like how Death has a different transformation every time. When he has a transformation. And a different fighting style.
Eventually, Alucard tracked down Shaft, about to bring Dracula back to the world.
No! No! You claim to love the darkness. Go then and dwell there for all eternity.
But it was too late. His father returned, and father and son reunited after centuries apart.
Now is the time to put aside your weak human side and join me in remaking this world!
Dracula, in the name of my mother, I will defeat you again!
There we go. Oh.
Behold my true form and its best!
Oh, wow. I mean, I've seen it before, but I forgot that.
Go back whence you came. Trouble the soul of my mother no more.
How is it that I've been so defeated?
You have been doomed ever since you lost the ability to love.
Tell me.
You tell him, Alucard.
What were Lisa's last words?
She said, do not hate humans. If you cannot live with them, then at least do them no harm. For theirs is already a hard lot. She also said to tell you that she would love you for all of eternity.
Lisa, forgive me.
Yeah, kind of made a mistake there, Dracula. Kind of a big mistake, too.
Alucard had helped destroy his father for the 2nd time, and Castlevania fell. Richter thanked Alucard for helping him, and Alucard decided to hide away from humanity again, closing the events of Symphony of the Night. Over time, Maria convinced Alucard to be part of the world, and stayed by his side, giving him companionship.
Oh.
And Alucard would soon help the human race.
Well, Richter's married, so...
Even though Dracula and Shaft were successfully
I guess that's
destroyed
fine.
by Alucard, Richter felt something was still very wrong. To his horror, he discovered that he could no longer touch the vampire killer whip. Dracula's ultimate plan became obvious. If he couldn't destroy the Belmont clan, he would take away their most powerful weapon.
Oh yeah. That's how we get like other.
Belmont blood became tainted, and the connection between the Belmonts and the whip was shattered. Join me next time for part 3, Passing the Torch, where we explore
part 3 should be interesting.
The Belmont clan and the power of the vampire killer.
The non-Belmont protagonists. Well, there we go. That was cool. We covered a lot of games there. I mean, the first one we only covered like 3, but I guess there were 3 that were pretty heavy in the backstory and mythos. But here we covered the 2 Game Boy original Game Boy games, and then the 2 Simon ones, the first 2 games, and then we went to Harmony of Dissonance, and Juice Day, and then finally we went to Richter, and, Alucard, but I guess Richter still, with Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night. What version of Rondo of Blood did I play? I'm kind of curious now. Oh, the PSP version. Yeah, that would have to be it. So, that's... Because it looked completely different. I mean, not completely different. Some stuff looked very similar, but some stuff looked a lot different. So, yeah. I played that one on the PSP, which is why it kind of felt odd to me. But I did, in fact, play that one. And, yeah. I mean, I played, I guess I played the last 3 in this video. I didn't play the Game Boy ones, and I didn't play the first two ones. But, I mean, yeah, the last 3 games we talked about. And Symphony of the Night, that's the real classic. And I don't know, it's just cool to go through it all. And just see everything. Even like the Game Boy ones that I haven't played, it's just cool to see what it looks like, see how you bring Castlevania to something like the Game Boy, something so limited. And it looked like they did pretty good, especially with the second one there. The first one looked a little basic, but the second one, it had some pretty cool stuff going on. Yeah, of course, the first 2, classic stuff. They established everything. Though that second one seems to not be everyone's cup of tea. But yeah, then we, it's interesting. It's interesting to just go through all the timeline and, put the events in order. Like, I never realized Juste was, or Juste, or however you say his name, I never realized that was, Richter's father, that it was that direct. I'm sure that was, well, I mean, that's actually, I mean, that game came after, so it probably isn't ever, I mean, maybe his name's mentioned, and that's why they, I don't know. And obviously, with Harmony of Dissonance, the reason you fight the Dracula Wraith and not actually Dracula is it was established that Dracula hasn't been fully resurrected in a while. So, yeah, since Simon. So they couldn't actually have Dracula be resurrected. They just had to kind of leave him partly resurrected, fighting his ghost or whatever. But yeah, cool stuff. Looking forward to the next one. It's all really interesting, and yeah, just I don't know. Probably because I'm a fan of the series. I mean, if you're not a big fan of Castlevania, I could see this maybe being a bit dull. But for me, someone who is invested in it and does have fond memories of a lot of these games, it's really cool to kind of go back through it and see the full story laid out. And yeah, definitely having fun with these. Hope you liked the reaction. Let me know if you did, and see you in the next one.